So that switch you see there, that is the attic fan switch. It's in the off position. The attic fan motor, no worky. So I picked up this one off of Amazon. I didn't even compare the RPMs or any of that stuff. It's an attic fan motor. It'll move air. So, and it's made to clamp band or band clamp into the fan shroud. So should be able to just one for one swap it and it'll be fine. Put everything I need in this bag. Tape, wire nuts, wrenches, screwdrivers, and hopefully we'll get this baby changed out rather quickly. I've already been up in the attic making a walkway for any future needs I might have to get up in the attic space. It is hot as heck up there already, but we'll make it happen. Alright, see you up there. Get it down, just put it back up. Sure. One thing at a time, dear. One thing at a time. Of course, all you guys are going to see right now is me crawling through the hole to get up here. Hopefully you can see the little bridge I made to stop doing this to the insulation. The little bridge is a pretty nice thing, especially coming through that hole. It gives me a place to put my knee at least till I get up to the peak here where I can actually stand up. Whew. It's not unbearable up here. It's hot, but and I'm sweating pretty hard, but that's all right. Don't move as nimbly as I used to. Thermostat, oh, that's my headlamp. Thermostat, control the operating temperature. Right now it's set for like 9,500. See, all the electrics just come right in from here into the thermostat housing. Boom, and there's the culprit. So we got 3 nut bolts that hold on the band clamp. We'll take that off. This should, in theory, just screw right over the new, what's it called? If you noticed when I was showing you the other motor, it had a nipple sticking out with the wires. This should thread right onto that nipple. All right, so we'll get started. Alright, right here's where I realized that the audio is not working very well on my GoPro. So I'm going to try to narrate some of this video for you. Do a little voiceover work. Right there, I'm just removing the thermostat housing from the roof truss, and so I can get to the wiring. The way this thing is wired is the switch that was in the garage feeds up on some Romex into the thermostat housing, and then the thermostat housing, of course, the wiring is set up inside of that, black to black, white to white. Black is hot, but not when the switch is in the off position. Right now I'm just trying to remove the thermostat housing from the flex conduit, and then but the output of the thermostat housing is the wiring goes up and into the motor. That way I can take the flex conduit down off the motor as I'm pulling the motor down. All right, thermostat housing down, just put this up here out of the way. You can see sticking out the white and black wires. That's black is hot, that goes to the actual thermostat. White is just a pass-through wire from the switch down below right straight to the fan motor. So those would just be wire tied together. Now it's time to start removing the fan assembly. I kind of mess up here, but you'll see in a little bit how that goes. But yeah, I just start loosening the 3 bolts that are holding it to the clamp assembly. And here the actual fan, I thought I could get the fan blade down through the hole kind of, but I had a second thought and thought, oh, I just won't remove all these bolts and I'll just take the fan blade off separately. It takes an Allen key or an Allen wrench to remove it. It's kind of a tight working quarters there. I probably should have just went ahead and removed the actual clamp assembly. Struggling with this quite a little bit up in there. Uh, Plus I'm using one of those multi-tool type Allen wrench sets, Harbor Freight Special, and I'm about to make the ultimate mistake, kind of losing track of myself. Keeping my hands where they should be. Had a hold of it there. Momentary lapse in judgment. I'm really struggling with it, as you can see. Bam. That went right through the ceiling. You want to stick around to the end and I'll show you how to fix a hole in your ceiling. How to build a patch, mud it in, tape it, all that good stuff, texture it, and eventually even paint it. This is your wiring diagram for your thermostat. Where it says power supply 120 volts, that is your black wire coming in, wire nutted to the black wire that's in your thermostat housing. As you'll see in the picture there, it goes through the thermostat and then on to another black wire out and onto the motor, all wire nutted together. The wire just above that would be your white wire, and it's basically just a pass-through wire, wire nutted straight through. And then of course your ground wire. Pretty simple, very simple actually. All electrical really is just this simple. So never be afraid to wire a light switch or a new light fixture in your home. It's all just this simple. Okay, so moving along, what else I can show you is what the inside of a box looks like. And this is exactly what they look like in real life. Towards the top, that represents the flex conduit that is going up to the motor. And as you see, it's a white and black wire, just like we had on the motor that I showed you in the garage. And then you have your Romex wire coming in that is either from a switch source or an outlet. Again, black to black, so that black wire you see is going down and into the thermostat control, and then out of the thermostat control on up to the lamp, or up to the motor, excuse me. And then the white wire, again, it's the Romex, and if you look really closely, you can see that just loops straight through and on up to the flexible conduit. It's just that simple, and we'll get her wired up and we'll get her done.
And I fumble. Boys, I've been drinking for days. Well, I stagger and I fumble. Boys, I've been drinking for days.
All right, so we got her all wired up. I'm now adjusting the temperature in which the fan will come on. And I had my wife turn on the switch down in the garage to provide power up to the thermostat. Now I'm just setting it for about 95 degrees, and that's about when the fan's kicking on, so it's 95 degrees in the attic. As you can see, it's vibrating pretty violently. That will not last or hold up at all. It'll actually start ripping that aluminum shroud apart, so we want to stop everything and get things tightened up a little better. So that's the first order of business, tightening up the bracketry. Yeah, definitely not the right tool for the job, you freaking tool. You know, the channel locks are good for a lot of things, but I actually have a ratchet wrench up there. I should have just grabbed it first, but I'll get there eventually. Work harder, not smarter. Yeah. Ever watch a man tighten his nuts? All right. Still just tightening up the mounting bracketry for the motor. And give it another test here in a minute. All right, and you can see it's still wobbling, and I got it pretty tight. So what I realized right here is actually the fan blades are kind of bent, probably from me jerking it around, trying to get it apart. So just going to slightly bend each blade as I turn it around. I'm using one of these mounting brackets as a reference point, and then just bending each blade to be an equal distance from that. And you'll see here in a moment. Get around, double check, triple check. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Move on to the next one. Yep, looks good, looks good. Give her a roll. And you can see right away the flexible conduit. Oh yeah, we got butter. Smooth as butter. All right, now let's go fix the hole in the ceiling. Oh, goody. And there's the result of me dropping that attic fan motor. That didn't help much. Yeah, pretty bad. So I popped out a couple nails. Yeah. I think what I tried to do though is just push it real good. And glue it, maybe, and paint it. We'll see how it turns out. Otherwise, it's cut, patch, mud, texture, paint, the whole bit. I'm going to try to avoid all that. I'm going to try to just push it all back into place, glue it, and paint over it. See if the boss approves. Well, I just pound it back into place. There's no way that's going to fly. So I'm going to have to cut that out, patch it. That's too bad. You can't barely see it, but that crack goes clear back to like right in there. But I think paint will be okay to fix that part of it. So I'll just have to cut the worst part out. In fact, some of that doesn't even have to come out. Some of it's just the paper on the sheetrock that's ripped. So I'm going to start with the smallest hole possible, patch it, and then try to mud and tape the rest of it back into place. All right, I cut myself a 6x6 patch. I put it up there on the ceiling and pretty much took out all the bad spot, marked it in there. Then take a sheetrock saw, pound it up in there, cut it out. And these are made with a pretty sharp tip. See if it'll focus. Focus. All right. So the saw is made with a pretty sharp tip to poke up in there. You can see where I laid out my template lines. So I'll just cut that out. And then the next thing we do is I'll shove the strapping up there to cross over the hole. The patch is about this big, so this will go on either side of the hole so I have something to screw to. Mud, texture, paint. Good thing the missus isn't here right now. So there's my hole. And oh, there's the fan motor I just put in. Huh. Funny how that works. Yeah. Yippee. And now you see I put the strapping in. Man, this thing ain't focusing worth a damn. It's probably that light. There we go. So now you see I put the strapping in. Just 4 screws. Now I have something to screw the patch into. Then eventually I'll have to go back up there and move the insulation back around. So put the patch in next. And there I just took the razor knife, scored along, and I started peeling that paper back. All right, that's kind of what I ended up with. You can see how I trimmed back the paint and paper from that side and trimmed back the paper on this side.
and it's close enough. Now, that'll give me someplace to put the drywall tape. All right, throw that up there with a few screws and we'll be good to go with the mud part. And there we have a patch. So now get some tape, wrap around there, mud it all in, let it dry, then do the texture. So for the tape, there's a couple different kinds. This is your paper sheetrock tape, and this is really good if you're using an actual mud compound, either mix your own or pre-mixed in a bucket. Great for long joints, you know, seaming two sheets together, 2 sheets of sheetrock together, full sheets. Really good. And this actually has a small line in here that's made for going inside and outside corners. So easy to fold, easy to work with. This requires you to put down a thin layer of mud first, then put this into it to hold it in place. This I like to use for patching. Basically, this is a mesh. If I can find the end of it, let me pause. There, it took me a little while, but to find the end of it. But as you see, this is a mesh, and it has a sticky back, so it will apply directly to the 2 pieces of material that I'm putting together. It'll apply to the patch and to the existing ceiling structure. So it'll hold itself in place while I put the joint compound up. This also gives something for the joint compound to bite to, because it will fill into these little, this little netting material. And for a patch, I like just having some of this stuff around. Vinyl spackle, it dries relatively fast. It's pretty adaptive, and it's just great for patching, easy for the homeowners to work with. That's what I would just use. A couple of the other tools, of course, you know, having a razor knife to cut the tapes with. You can also use this to cut the tape with. You just hold it in place and then rip the tape along its edge. This is a 6-inch or 5-inch putty knife. As you can see, it's well used. You know, I've had this one for probably 15, 16 years, and they're, you know, they last forever. This will be an adequate size for my patch job. You know, large floating jobs where you're taping 2 seams together on a full sheet, yeah, you're going to want a 12-inch knife, but this is good for a patch. This is just something I like to have around for scooping the mud up out of the smaller container. And also one of these painter multi-tools, pretty handy. It's handy for cutting the tape. It's scraping, you know, what do they call it? A 10-in-1, 5-in-1 tool. So, oh yeah, 5-in-1 tool. So anyways, and this focus today is just not working well. There you go. 5-in-1. I'll even hold the right side up. There you go. 5-in-1 tool. So pretty handy to have around. These are just some of the basic tools. You know, you can get by without this, but this, and the small putty knife, 5-6-inch putty knife, you know, your tape selection, and then your spackling compound. And I may or may not use that to do my texture, but I'll at least get this filled in and leveled out using that. Dries pretty fast, sands pretty clean, so we're gonna give that a shot. And there you have it with the mesh tape around the seams. Now I'll just lay a layer of spackling over it. There you have first very, very, very rough coat. But yeah, you see some knife marks, but I'm starting to pull the tape back up through the mud, so I wanted to quit working it. Well, as luck would have it, I lost the footage to my ceiling repair. So I'm going to mock something up here in the shop, give you a few tips on how I do it, or show you how I do it. Whether you choose to follow my example, it's up to you. But it comes out pretty good and saves you a few bucks hiring a special mud guy to come in. So let's get to it. All right, that took a lot longer than I would have liked, but again, here's the patch.
Go in here. Oop. And down along through here. That's your patched area. And then you just, I like to use this mesh tape for these kind of jobs. And I got to get rid of my fold over. The mesh tape is got a sticky surface. This is pretty old tape, but it'll do the job. A lot of the stickum is gone, is what I'm saying. You see there, now that tape is flush with the paper edge. Use your multi-tool just to rip it off. Your 5-in-1. And that'll stick good enough to get your mud on it. And this is a process. It takes a few coats to get this all worked in. Oop, that one didn't stick very good. And there you have it. That is ready for the first layer of mud. I like to use this 6-inch trowel for this type of work. Putty knife, whatever you want to call it. The pre-mixed mud is great for this kind of stuff. It's a little bit easier to work with, but you can also use this. And this is great for filling nail holes and stuff. I usually don't have such a big tub of it around the house, but you know, I got it. So, and this stuff here, I've had this for over a year, and it's still, as long as you keep it sealed. And I'm just using my 5-in-1 tool right now. I'll use the bigger knife when I really get to spreading it. And you just pull out these loose strings, get rid of those. Really all you're trying to do is get enough mud on here to smooth out where you're not seeing the mesh. As you can see there, I'm pretty much flush with a very thin coat of mud. I'm just about flush with the original sheetrock paper right now. So, you know, when the light hits it at different times of the day, you won't see a bump in your work. And that's the goal. That's why you cut that paper away like that. It is a little extra work, but I think you end up with a better finish that way. And it was really quite a struggle getting that paper off this time. I don't usually have that. It took me like 5 minutes to cut that paper out of there. Anyways, that should be enough mud. And you see that's very sloppy. I want to clean that up. Taking the 6-inch and just working out all the lumps, getting her flat, filling in all the little air pockets, pulling out the crazy hair. Oh, that one, see, that one pulled up. Don't like that. There we go. Just push it right back down, right into the mud. And this stuff sets up pretty fast. Probably within a half an hour I can come back and what I like to do actually when I'm working this stuff is rather than use sandpaper, use a wet sponge. And just lightly run over it with a wet sponge. Then you don't end up with the dust all in your house. And this might take a second coat, but for now, I'm going to call that pretty good. and it's already drying on me. So we'll clean this up. You don't want that dry stuff in there because that's just going to rake through my finish and cause problems. So that's pretty smooth. That's pretty smooth. It'll be better once I take a sponge across that. So we'll give it half an hour and we'll come back. It should look pretty good. Got second coats pretty good. It is a little wavy. I could take the sponge technique and do it again, but I got this piece of sheetrocking sanding screen. Just kind of run that across the patch a little bit. There's the high spot right there. Kind of figures where it's the wettest. Really what you want to do is avoid having to do a lot of sanding because you end up with that. But I'll take the sponge, clean up the dust. That's the beauty of the sponge trick though, is you don't end up with all of this dust in the house. There, that looks pretty good, pretty clean. What I like to use to make my texture is just an old sponge, and I actually just plucked out some of this just to give it some kind of dimension, some depth. But they actually make rollers and sponges that are designed for this. But I had this old sponge laying around, I figured I'd use it. You know, I was using this side to do the leveling of the compound, and then I'll use this side to apply the texture. Now really the best thing for using texture, of course you have the spray cans that you can do the orange peel texture with, and those are great, especially when you're doing wall work and you're trying to match existing orange peel texture. My ceiling, I actually went through and did this technique to the entire ceiling throughout most of the house. And but what you'll want is actually probably the best thing to use would be some of the mud compound, the pre-mixed stuff, and then probably actually take some of that and put it into a separate container and just water it down. Now I'm just using the same vinyl spackling that I used to do the patch, and it was so dried out and old, right? It's like I said, this is a couple years old. I just added water to it and made it pretty soupy, pretty runny. I'm going to throw it away after this use anyways. I probably don't have to though. I mean, it'll still work. It'll still work for little patch jobs and stuff. But the vinyl spackling is not quite as good, you know, for this type of work as say the actual mud compound. But we'll just take some and we'll just spread it on here like so. Yeah, that's a good little amount. Let's see how that does. Yeah, that's looking all right. Take up these bigger chunks. And you just kind of got to imagine that your entire ceiling is done this way. Actually, the looser this stuff is, the easier it is to apply, unless you're after a really big, clumpy look. But I'm definitely not going to leave it like this. Yeah, it's still a little bit too lumpy. You don't really need it that lumpy. Then you'll take your trowel. Let me see if I can get a lower angle on this so maybe you can see the texture a little bit better. It's hard to see white on white. Let's try that. And then just kind of rake your trowel across it. It's still a little dry. So, like I said, I just want to get these big clumps out. I do not like those. And you can do this technique with the spray can stuff too. You just spray it on really heavy and then go back over it with your sponge, and or spray it on really heavy and then take your and just drag it across it. Try to avoid any lines. Like I'm trying to get all the line work out of it. And that is about it. I'd say actually that looks really quite good now. See if I can get you in here closer. And you can see how I've spread it and flattened it out. And that'll come out right there. That's okay. And then basically just let this dry a little bit. And there's a couple lines in it. There's a line that's going through here right there. But I'm gonna work that out. Making it worse. There we go. So that's what it should look like at this point. Then one last mild sanding or a bit of sponge work, a wet sponge across it, just to get out the roughness, and it'll be ready for paint. So we'll come back in about an hour, take you through the next step. All right, there it is. It's all dried up pretty much. I mean, it's a little damp yet, but yeah, I mean, you could just run that over that one more time. You don't really probably get the feel for what the texture really is, but basically they're calling this a knockdown texture. That's where you've applied the material and then you use your putty knife to knock it down, spread it out, and it's a pretty nice finish. Kind of gives it that lace sort of look. You know, feller likes his lace. Anyways, yeah, that's it. I did this same technique to the ceiling in the house, and I probably should have gave it another sand, but I already threw a coat of paint on it. Let's go have a look. And there's the patch all done. And you can see right there, I kind of got a bump, so I just need to get a piece of sandpaper and maybe take that out. Maybe a little sanding right there. And basically, once you take care of that, you can't see it anymore. Alrighty. Well, the moral of the story is, don't drop your fan motor. And if you do, you better know how to fix it.